So, first of all, your character plays such a pivotal role in John's world. What was most interesting for you to step into that part?
I think for me was Dottie's sort of great big ball of humanity, I think, and her real understanding of John, and seeing, you know, when she first meets him, she sees this young man. She doesn't see his tics. She just sees this young man who needs a bit of a helping hand, and, you know, she's intrigued by him, and I think, you know, she sees his potential. But yeah, it's, you know, because it's an interesting scenario, isn't it? You know, she's his, you know, John's, you know, friend Murray's mum, and that they set up this sort of really beautiful platonic friendship between an older woman and a younger man, you know, and just that they are real friends and they've got real respect for each other, and they share a wicked sense of humour, and they help each other. I think the real thing, they help each other through.
What was the process like collaborating with Rob on this?
Yeah, it was great because, you know, Rob's very focused. You know, he's a really focused actor, and, you know, so I suppose for me though, it's always when the camera rolls. You know what I mean? You can do. It's a job as an actor to go. You that chemistry and whatever happens once the camera's up and going. You can't. I don't think you can prepare for that. Yeah.
And did you do any specific research about, like, to understand the environment John sort of grew up in?
I mean, I saw the John's Not Mad first documentary when it came out. I must have been probably about 10 or 11 when I was at primary school, and I remember having a huge impact. And it had a huge impact on I remember the next day in the playground, everyone talking about it, because none of us knew what Tourette's was, and it was, you know, it was really sort of fascinating. And there was this young guy who was probably only a few years older than us. You know, I mean, I'm not, you know, sort of similar age to John. And then I did a job years ago called Shameless with a brilliant actor called Jack Dean, who played my brother Marty, whose character had Tourette's. And we had this big discussion, I remember, about John, because he was saying it really influenced him. And do you remember the documentary John's Not Mad? And I said I did. And then when it was my birthday, he bought me the follow-up documentary. So I was saying, it feels like John's always sort of been there. And I think for my generation especially, his story made such a huge impact. So, yeah, but meeting Dottie and Chris and Marie, the family, then meeting John. So just getting to and going up to Gala Shields and getting a sense of what it's like on the borders there as well, you know what I mean? And just their relationships, and they're just beautiful people, you know, and they felt like a real family, and John's so much part of that family.
What do you sort of hope your role contributes to the message of the overall film, if anything?
Well, I just think it's about understanding, isn't it? You've got to see the person. Open your hearts, open your minds, you know. Everybody's got something to offer. John's definitely got bucket loads to offer, but, you know, we're all, yeah, I just think it's about awareness and about connection, and just being open to connect to people and understand, and maybe we can all get along a bit better, yeah.
Absolutely. And what was working with Kirk like on this project?
Yeah, because he'd written it and directed it. So, to be with somebody who saw, you know, and him and Rob had this very tight sort of collaboration. So, yeah, it was really interesting, yeah.
Which scene proved to be the most, like, emotionally charged, I suppose, for you? Did you find any particular standout?
Emotionally charged scene? I think probably the scene in the hospital after John's been, you know, he's badly beaten, and that was heartbreaking to think that John had gone through, and a few times because people's ignorance had, you know, resulted in, you know, them inflicting physical violence on him, and that was, you know, I mean, I know, you know, mental, you know, sort of violence but just to see him so helpless, and yeah, that was pretty upsetting, yeah.
I guess my first question is, how did the two of you work together in shaping the role of John, so that it felt authentic, yet also obviously for a film?
It was kind of two levels, really. There was the work that I did before Rob came on board to put the script together. I listened to John, I wrote down everything that he told me, I ordered everything, and I completed a script. That script went to Rob, and once Rob had got the part and we started to work together, Rob dived in really deep with his research, spoke to as many people as he could, read as much as he could, spent weeks and weeks with John doing the gardening, going to the shops, watching the rugby on TV. And so then Rob would have comments that related to the script because his knowledge was then that much greater. And I was very grateful for those comments, and I listened to his view and to John's view. John was an executive producer, so everything was shown to John. So if he had any concerns, then I would rework it or make sure that he was happy. So that's that. Yeah, that's really how it was. Kind of two levels. It was like before Rob and after Rob. I thought it was better before, personally.
You mentioned that John was a producer on the film. What was it like to work so closely with him on this?
Yeah, I loved it because he's so knowledgeable and so forthcoming about everything that he knows and that he can teach you about, and he wants to teach you. He wants you to learn, and he was really passionate about the film and about authenticity, and he was very big on bringing out a 360-degree perspective of his his life, and so bringing in OCD and intrusive thoughts and stuff like that was very much John was passionate about that because it very rarely exists on its own, and he was really keen to make sure that we didn't represent it just on its own.
Speaking obviously on educating people, what do you sort of both hope that viewers that may not know much about Tourette's can sort of take away from this or learn?
I think on a basic level, the very least that I would hope is that people understand Tourette's syndrome more. They understand that not everyone who has Tourette's swears. In fact, only about 10% of people who have Tourette's swear, and that level of Tourette's is called coprolalia. And there are many, many more complex versions of the condition. In fact, it's very rare for any two people to have exactly the same symptoms. On occasions, it's wrapped up with OCD, autism, levels of autism, ADHD. So that would be one thing that would be really nice for them to take away, in addition to being entertained and made to laugh and maybe made to shed a tear. It'd be really nice if there's a very low level of education that takes place at the same time, for me anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
Was there a particular piece of advice from Kirk that you got that sort of helped unlock the role at all?
I think Kirk is so open and so collaborative, and I think it's not. Sometimes it's not easy to be that way. You know what I mean? And obviously, Kirk had been working on the script for a long time before I came into it. So, but from the word go, he was so open to my thoughts and to collaborating on it and to working together. And I never really felt like there was any kind of barriers for us. We just seemed to have a good working relationship, which is it's rarer than you think, I think.
And what drew you to showing this story in particular? What drew you into wanting to make this, I suppose?
I've always kind of been fascinated by humour and comedy and emotion and tragedy in stories, whether it's a novel or a children's story or a film that I make or other people make. And I think this was the most potent mix of humour and emotion, just kind of all mixed up together in the same condition on a daily basis for John, but also with for people with Tourette's. And very early on, I just wanted to make sure, I said to John, if I identified a level of humour in your condition, would that upset you? Would it annoy you? Would it irritate you? And he said no. He said, as a community of people with Tourette's, we laugh all the time at the things that happen to us, but also of this condition which makes you speak without any filter whatsoever. And especially in 2025, it's when we are all, for good reason, trying to be very careful about how we say things. Suddenly, there are people with Tourette's who are just, saying things that they shouldn't say in public, and that can deliver a level of humour, but it can also be dangerous. It can be really, really dangerous, which we've seen in the film.
both your characters are so central to the story, but obviously this is a real story. So how do you sort of approach a role like that?
I don't know. I mean, we don't get very much time. You know, you get offered it and then it begins just not long after. I knew she was a real person, so and I thought, well, what have you got there that can show me she's real? There's a documentary. Let's begin. So look at that and try and get clues into her physicality, try and get clues to her voice, try and get clues what her thought process might be from all of that. And then you try and feed a little bit of that into the script that you've actually been given. What clues are there that you recognise, and you just start to build from that. And then hopefully by the time you start filming, you feel a little bit of her inside you. And then you just see what happens thereafter.
Do you go, does it start to come to you with voice or clothes or?
A wee bit of voice, a wee bit of movement, trying to see the way she was at the table and the kind of wee shifts in her eyes and things like that. And it's very hard you can't get it always in the film. There's moments I think, I'll try and get that in at the dinner, and it doesn't happen because Kirk's got another agenda. He's directing it, I'm not directing it. And I'm just looking for clues. I'm looking to think, when can I drop that? Can I drop that? And no, I can't, that's gone for that. Maybe I can, maybe that. And your brain's working all the time, but you're not really... I'm not even aware that I'm doing that. It's just you're hopeful that you can get little tiny bits in. So movement and a wee bit of the voice, and then see what happens from there. And then you have to let go.
It was very different for me because obviously I was playing a real guy, but there wasn't the information.
Yeah.
So for me, it was more about finding and it wasn't difficult. You know, it was really just to allow the moments to just breathe and improvise if I felt it was appropriate and wait for Kirk to pull me back or otherwise. And he didn't, which was really lovely from my end. You know, he was up for it. And I mean, as actors, obviously, we are glorified whores, you know, so if a director laughs, you're like, you know, so if I could see him laugh behind camera, I mean, I'm a complete tart. I mean, I'll do whatever's necessary to get a laugh, you know, and I'm, you know, you end up like a seal if they throw you a wee fucking fish, you know, you'll perform a bit more. So I would do that. I could see him behind the camera in the monitor, and if he was giggling, I would play around. But that's only because it was specific to the character. And that's where I had a fun time. It was much harder for Shirley and for Maxine and for Rob, obviously. My task was pretty straightforward and very, I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't enjoyable for the guys. From my end, it was very enjoyable because I could just have a laugh.
He lets it run so that you can get confident to then play and offer stuff up, because it can be very nerve-wracking to be in with. And you're a bit locked. And if you need that moment, if it's too fast, if it's too, I've moved on, but you found that, you know.
And you also, it depends on who you're working with. Like Rob was very open to it, even though Rob was having to do all the physicality. Rob was very open to playing the moment. Some actors might struggle with that. Some actors might be expecting you to not drift off-piste. It might throw them. And again, in the hierarchy of a film, if you're only in for a few days and they're in for the full 6, 7, 8 weeks, you're kind of going, I'm here to accommodate you, you know, and you never got that from Rob at all, because Rob was very much in the world that we're all in. Because sadly, you might get an actor who thinks that you're just playing a call sheet. So if they're number one, that's the way it should work, and there's a hierarchy. Those actors usually don't last very long, but some do. And that then rubs off on those of us who are, for want of a better word, character actors who come in. If you've got someone like that, you're less inclined to bring your full game. Not that you sabotage, not that you go into a huff, but if somebody's creating an atmosphere for you, then you're less inclined to want to,
the moment doesn't come.
Play it.
The moment doesn't come that you can then do the thing that you feel maybe you could offer up. So
atmosphere is really big on a film set.
We all look after each other in this film, don't we? So it's a nice.
Yeah.